Learning about learning. Do students have different learning styles? I chose to focus on this topic because I previously thought that all students definitively had different learning or cognitive styles. I would have previously labeled myself as a kinesthetic learner, and as an educator I realized I'd been making judgments about students' cognitive learning styles, which resulted in misconceptions about how students learn and how I've been teaching. I interviewed the principal at my school, Samantha Del Ponte, CIO and Vice President at the College of Medicine at University of Central Florida, Jerry Aubert, and my mother, Marnie Earnest, who is a licensed social worker and has worked in many K-12 schools. The questions that I asked were, do you believe that students have different learning styles, such as visual, auditory, and kinesthetic? If so, why do you believe that, or what evidence have you seen that proves this? And what type of learning environment do you believe is conducive to student learning, and why? Some background information first that I focused on was the differences between cognitive styles and cognitive abilities. Cognitive styles are biases or tendencies to think in a particular way, whereas cognitive abilities refers to how we deal with content and how they reflect the level of what we know and what we're able to do. According to Willingham, if students have different learning styles, then that particular cognitive style should be present in different situations and on different days. It's something that is within you. They should be consequential, so using one style or another should impact the important things we do. He states that styles are how we prefer to think, but do not necessarily measure how well we think, and therefore people with different styles should not differ in ability. However, there aren't any theories that can prove this. Therefore, the answer to the question, do students have different learning styles, is essentially no. The interview with my mom, Marnie Earnest, I sent her the questions over email, and I also had a phone conversation with her in which I had a few different observations. Her automatic answer about different learning styles was yes, similar to some other interviewees. She focused a lot on students with disabilities, which was really interesting because this wasn't addressed in the Willingham article at all, and it was something that I had commented and kind of discussed with another student in our course about the differences with students with disabilities. She used an example of my brother, who's hearing impaired but has a somewhat photographic memory, and then that resulted in a long discussion about how styles indicate how we prefer to think, but it doesn't actually measure how well we think. It's measuring the wrong materials, which was something that she had never really heard of before. As far as learning environments go, she talked about different stations and having an open, active learning environment. Willingham, what is found to be true, the prediction that students will learn better when instruction matches their cognitive style is not true because the wrong materials are being measured, as I mentioned before. Therefore, if Jane believes she's an auditory learner and listens to a tape of vocab words, she should then theoretically learn those words better than if she were to just read them. However, what's happening here is that it's not the auditory information being tested, it's not the sound of the voice, whether it's male or female, the inflections, things like that. What's actually being tested is the meaning of the words. Therefore, remembering the voice doesn't actually measure whether or not she remembered the meaning of the words. And this is the interview with my principal.
My name is Samantha Del Ponte. I am the principal at Orange County Preparatory Academy.
So my first question is, do you believe that students have different learning styles, such as visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and why do you believe this?
Yes, I believe that there are many different learning styles. Over my 9.5 years in education, I have witnessed it in all of the classrooms I've taught. Most of my experiences with gifted children, where it's very apparent the different learning styles. They don't always rely on one. Sometimes they combine learning styles, and sometimes they ping-pong back and forth depending on what the task at hand is or what they're learning, what the concept is, and they will decide what's best for them, which learning style they use.
And what type of learning environment do you believe is most conducive to student learning, and why?
I believe an environment with exploration is most conducive for students. It gives the students the opportunity to use multiple learning styles and choose which one best fits them.
Some observations about this interview was that Ms. Del Ponte also answered yes, stating that students do have different learning styles. She also mentioned students with special needs, such as gifted children, which again haven't really been addressed and I haven't actually found much research on. She focused on students combining learning styles or using multiple learning styles depending on what it is that they are learning. However, this contradicts Willingham's belief that a learning style should work regardless of when or where you are using it. She goes on to talk about different environments where exploration is allowed and where students can participate in cooperative learning, which allows students to work together and utilize their learning style, which may not work well for others, so that they work together as a group. Willingham talks about the visual auditory kinesthetic theory as well, saying that it is not correct because the point of this is that the same material can be presented in different ways to match each student's strength, which we just don't have the time for as teachers. And the reason that we've believed this for so long is due to confirmation bias. Once we've believed it, we internalize it, and we don't really second guess it. And here's the interview with Jerry Aubert.
I think that that times are changing. So I think we're seeing a lot more audio-visual interaction with the students, and that's certainly one of the things that we're trying to do here at the College of Medicine. We're trying to use the technology to deliver content in a variety of different ways. So our classrooms are all outfitted with pretty high-tech projectors. We've got iPad access. All the teachers are roaming around with iPads and interacting, as well as the students, and then of course the laptops and phones. So they're just that's their natural habitat these days. Since childhood, these students are using a variety of different devices and accessing content like never before.
Some observations with my interview with Jerry is that he focuses his answers on technology because times are changing. The other two interviews that I conducted, technology wasn't even brought up in any of our conversations. He talks about how technology is used to deliver content, such as using projectors, iPads, laptops, smartphones, YouTubes, just because this is a natural habitat for students, so why not utilize it? He really kind of attacks these questions in a different format as the other interviews that I conducted, and looks at it as a way more of how we are teaching rather than how students are learning. So he talks about providing and creating content that students can access, using EDUCAUSE as a source of evidence to back what they're doing there at the College of Medicine. And he talks later on about different environments, using different ecosystems, focusing on group learning, real-life scenarios, and setting up classrooms that foster that environment, as well as using quiet stations as well so that students can really focus on their content. Willingham and theory of multiple intelligence. The main point of this is that it's important to note that different abilities or different intelligences are not interchangeable. So musical skills will not help a student learn a math concept. It might help interest the student more, but you can't take one thing you are good at and leverage it to help a weakness. Some references in support of Willingham that I found were conducted by Susan Santo, who completed a series of literature reviews finding that there was no significant relationship between test scores and learning styles. There wasn't a really strong relationship or no relation between student engagement and learning styles, and students who succeeded did so regardless of their learning styles. According to Curry, there were many shortcomings when it comes to determining learning styles. There's no concrete definition of a learning style. There's overlapping. Learning styles studies have been too small. There were extreme scores and many other reasons why you can't really count on this term learning style. The last one in support of Willingham, concepts and evidence. Researchers were finding no evidence that meets the standards of using a learning style assessment in an instructional setting. Some references in opposition to Willingham. There were a few researchers who completed research to help businesses and trainers, as well as learners, determine their individual learning styles. They believe that this really helped the business train their workers properly so that they were most efficient in their jobs. Learning styles in online education. More research conducted by Zapaska and Brozick indicated that in order to help students succeed online, instructors must understand how students learn, how they perceive, and how they process information so that they can adapt their teaching strategies to accommodate these learners and their strengths and their needs. In conclusion, I believe that students do different in cognitive abilities, but the idea of substituting one cognitive strength for a cognitive weakness is incorrect. This is in conjunction with Willingham's belief. It's important to recognize the difference between cognitive ability and cognitive style. Therefore, we should be treating students individually based off of the teacher's interaction and experience with each student to identify what works. And lastly, one must consider background knowledge as well in addition to cognitive processes, because cognitive processes cannot function alone. These are the references that I used.